There's one room where you're with your family, and then as soon as you walk past the door, it's like the lights change, the lights go darker, the halls get dirty. They start cursing at you, screaming at you, pushing you, grabbing you, cutting your hair off, taking your clothes off, telling you that you won't be leaving anytime soon, that you don't need any of your things, and that you won't be talking to anybody, so get used to it. Your first 10 days, you're sleeping in a hallway. All night long, you hear kids screaming and crying from the various punishment rooms, from their bedrooms, from all different kind of areas in the facility. Throughout the night, you're woken up at 2 o'clock, at 4 o'clock in the morning to go outside in the cold and the rain.
It's going to be a really neat behind the scenes.
And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so weird.
Because something always magical happens.
Wait, what? Did you just make that up? Hey, it's Meredith for Real, the Curious Introvert. Listen each week as I talk with someone new. The topics are as ADD as I am, but they'll inspire you to stay curious and grow.
Hey, Curiositors, it's me, Meredith. I hope you're getting a lot out of the mental health series so far. I know the holidays can be hard, and honestly, 2020 has depleted a lot of our happiness reserve. My hope for this podcast as a whole is to give you bright, meaningful entertainment every week. And I think my guest this week brings that 100%. You've probably never heard of WWASP teen rehab centers, but in this episode, you will. And you're going to hear it through the perspective of someone who survived not just one, but several of them. He even escaped one in Mexico, only to be sent to another in New York with the same abuser from the Mexico facility because he had transferred to the facility. This is one of those episodes where you're going to go, what? This is a thing? But what I hope that you hear louder and more clearly than the shock of this terrible organization is the pattern of hope throughout my guest's story and his bravery. Not just bravery while he was at the facilities, but his bravery to speak openly about it. His bravery to continue to have a loving relationship with his parents who sent him to these facilities. His bravery to go back to the facilities where he suffered these traumas. He's not someone who has it all figured out, but he's someone who is committed to healing, which might be the most inspiring part of all of it. And as of this recording, he hadn't even really spoken with a therapist in depth about his experiences. That makes this such a unique view inside of the heart of a person who is walking by faith that he will be a whole person and that he can help others in the state he is in now, and that he will meet the right people along the way. I feel so blessed to be one of those people, and I think you will too. Curiositors, meet Rocky Kandola. Prisoner in a nightmarish teen rehab center. Felon. Law student. Sex abuse victim. Los Angeles resident. Business owner. Are these things experiences or identities? How do we separate the entirety of our person from our experiences, good and bad? That's what we will discuss with my next guest. He spent his teen years in 9 different facilities and boot camps around the world, some of which are now closed due to severe child abuse, rape, and torture. He has spent his adult years as a successful business owner and redesigning his identity. Enduring entrepreneur, peace seeker, 31 and the best is yet to come, Rocky Kandola.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Meredith.
I'm so glad that we met. I'm so glad that you reached out to me. And your story, like I said, is you ain't boring, son. You ain't boring. And I love how I'm just so impressed by how much joy that you have, in your life and how willing you are to face such the darkest corners of your personal experiences head on. Like it totally inspires me. So if that means anything to you, you have inspired me. And I know that my listeners will be so inspired by who you are as a person, not just your story, but who you are now is the inspiring part for sure.
Definitely. And that's the goal, right? Just with everything we've been through in our past, if we have the opportunity to inspire, motivate others using what we've been through, that's a blessing in itself.
It is. And for you, so much of your story centers around these teen rehab centers, rehab with air quotes, that were really abuse in the name of treatment, especially the WWASP ones. I'm sure as your story unfolds, people will want to know this. So we'll just start with this question. What was it that caused your parents to decide that you needed to go there? Because obviously they didn't know that it was bad. So what was the motivating factor there?
Definitely. So my parents were kind of traditional Indian parents growing up, and they wanted their kids to stay home, to study, to be, head first into the books. And which, I was a very smart kid growing up. I always had good grades, but I always talked back to my teachers and I always wanted to be, and my parents, and I wanted to be out and about. And I didn't want to stay inside. I wanted to go play tennis, to go run around the neighborhood, to play hide and go seek. And my parents really didn't like these things. They really wanted me at home studying. And the older I got, the more I wanted to do and the less they wanted me to do. So, at an early age, my dad taught me how to drive. The family at 11 years old, I think 12, I looked like a 15 or 16-year-old. So he kind of, was like, okay, let me give him a shot. And that quickly led into me sneaking his car out at night. In the middle of the night, I would, I'd put it in neutral, roll it down the driveway, and then just go for a joyride, go to Taco Bell and Crystals and pick up friends and get food. And one of those nights, unfortunately, I was pulled over by the police in my local small hometown. And the police knew my parents actually, so they called them. And instead of going to tennis camp in Louisiana the next day, the Nike tennis camps, I was actually headed off towards my first, quote unquote rehab facility in Ensenada, Mexico, Baja California, called Casa by the Sea by the Worldwide Association of Specialty Programs. And that was the beginning of, a 6-year journey between boot camps and schools and military schools and boarding schools, starting at around 11, 12 years old.
And I don't think people know what these centers are. I had to look it up. And so can you paint the scene for what those WWASP centers look like, or at least the one in Mexico, and kind of what the normal treatment is there?
Got it. So these are global for-profit businesses that operate, all across the world. And they have a variety of different legal factors and manipulations that they kind of put into their marketing plans in order to entice families who have troubled teens or troubled families to be able to get their family back and get their kids back and save their lives. They market to parents, saying, they're the best doctors, the best food, the best care, the best education, none of which could be farther from the truth. All of it is basically outright lie. There's no, set studying there. There's no counselor beyond, once a month here and there meeting if you're acting up type of thing. And the counselors that they do bring in are basic, just people looking to diagnose kids with, the DSM tests and things like that. The structure of the schools is very intense. It's very brainwashing oriented, very abuse as far as, verbal as well as physical and obviously sexual, the whole gamut basically. When you first walk in these facilities, if you're escorted by an escort, which I was escorted later in life, where you get kidnapped in the middle of the night, your hands cuffed, your ankles cuffed, and you get escorted across the country to one of these schools. You're already kind of in a trauma shock mode as soon as you get woken up in the middle of the night. My first time I was brought with my parents, my mom actually, who flew into San Diego, then drove me down. As soon as you leave, the sight of your mom, which for me, I actually told you before we started, I actually got to go back to the school and see that this weekend. There's one room where you're with your family, and then as soon as you walk past the door, it's like the lights change, the lights go darker, the halls get dirty, they start cursing at you, screaming at you, pushing you, grabbing you, cutting your hair off, taking your clothes off, telling you that you won't be leaving anytime soon, that you don't need any of your things, and that you won't be talking to anybody, so get used to it. Your first 10 days you're sleeping in a hallway. All night long you hear kids screaming and crying from the various punishment rooms, from their bedrooms, from all different kind of areas in the facility. Throughout the night, you're woken up at 2 o'clock, at 4 o'clock in the morning to go outside in the cold and the rain and count down. Any kind of looking out of line, standing up or sitting down without permission, talking without permission is dealt with very strictly. From physical all the way to punishments that, are made to kind of break a person, which is sitting on the last 4 inches of a chair, and, listening to audio tapes and writing it down all day long, until the next level of punishment, where if you mess up in there, you get put in a room, hands and feet tied behind your back, stomach on the ground, chin on the ground, facing a wall with possibly a guy sitting on top of you for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, even longer days than that, depending on how bad they want to punish you. Schooling there is just done by reading a textbook and taking a test at the end of the chapter. The entire day is regimented and strict. You don't get any communication with your peers, nor with the outside world. Any kind of, like I said before, any kind of like variance from the rules as far as looking out of line, sitting up or standing down without permission, is dealt with very strict. If you want to go to the restroom, there's only one 4-hour break. Every 4 hours you can go. If you want to go before that, you have to take what's called a consequence, which is a infraction of the rules, which one consequence, it gets you basically an extra couple of days added onto an indefinite sentence at this place. What they used to tell us is that I was 12. When you turn 18, if you don't graduate by the time you're 18, you're going to get $50 and a bus pass, and you're going to get put on the border of Mexico and U.S. and be told to live your life because your parents will never take you back, and they don't want you, and they know you're manipulating them, and they don't want anything to do with you.
Oh my gosh.
So it's a huge mind trip and brainwash game especially at that age.
And mental torture. And at a time where you are developing some important developmental milestones, or at least you're supposed to. So I can't imagine, how that interrupted your development as a young man.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I read a quote maybe a week ago on one of our Facebook groups where they were like, you don't want to make yourself a victim, but if you feel like, the other people around you in your age group did have an advantage, like, you're not, it's not valid because, while they were, worrying about, how to fit in and how to get past school and how to do this and that, like you were basically at a point where you're just worrying how to survive. And that really resonated with me because I remember back then thinking that like, okay, Rocky, like you're in this now, like you need to not die. You need to make it out of this. You need to somehow figure out what else could be out there in life. Just don't die. Don't give up. Don't give in, try to get past this. And I remember that was actually a pretty big pattern in my life, moving forward after that. I literally would just look for how to survive, for me, learning how to live came much later, after I put myself through other things, at a later age in life was when I realized, okay, you know what, maybe I should shift from just trying to make it and survival mode to actually living, life how I want to live and creating something beautiful for myself.
So it's almost like instead of your identity being, I'm gonna live like you said, or I'm gonna do X, Y, or Z. Your whole identity was just a mantra to not die. Survive,
make it through this as good as I could. I mean, I think at that age I didn't know that I was being mentally abused. Really, physically it was kind of obvious. Sexually it was obvious, but mentally I was just like, these thoughts are in my brain. I can't go crazy. I just need to make sure that, I'm okay enough to be able to get out. And it was normal, even to this day when people tell me like, hey, I've never heard of these places, I had to look it up. It shocks me because I'm like, wow, like in my brain, it was all normal. It was like, this is something that, one out of every few kids has to go through. And that's just what it is. And I think that's why it's so important that we're sharing and talking and people, even like Paris Hilton, are able to shed light upon these topics now. Because, there's how many kids are out there that just feel like this is normal. This is what they're supposed to go through. This is what life is. And how does that, direct the future of their thoughts and their communities and how they act and behave in those communities as well. So it's very, very far reaching consequences when you really think about it.
When did Paris Hilton talk about it?
She just did a documentary called This Is Me, the last month or so. The documentary is on Netflix now. It's called This Is Me. She went to a school called Provo Canyon in Utah. Very similar regimented program, except it's in the U.S. So the ones outside of the U.S. are thought to be more of the crazier ones because they kind of operate outside of the U.S. laws a little bit anyway. But the ones in the U.S. are still horrible, crazy, and the allegations of abuse and sexual trauma and stuff that the kids face there are equal, if not sometimes greater than the ones that I went through at my boot camp.
Wow, that's crazy. So how did you switch from just survive, and that was your identity, is just like an animal surviving? How did you switch that to now I'm going to live and I'm going to create and do?
Well, I kind of took that well into my adult years. I mean, when I was finally released from my last program on the border of Canada and New York, I was ready to live. And for me at that age, living meant literally going against every authority figure and every kind of rule of society that there was, which ended up equaling out to me selling drugs, partying, women, that kind of lifestyle, just 24/7, which, is an identity of itself and it's living in a certain sense, but it's not really, in my opinion now, as I've grown up, not really, what we can do with our lives as far as I believe that, part of the definition of life is being able to share and give, because you can't really take anything with you when you leave. And it really measured your life. It measures your life based on what you're able to give and share with the world versus what you're able to take in and keep. So, that really didn't change for me until after I was out of prison, after I, went crazy into drugs and alcohol and partying and selling and doing drugs, until one day after prison, when I started getting back in the same lifestyle, that something kind of came into me, a higher power, an energy, something within myself, that was coming from, a place of greater good, just said, "Hey, Rocky, like, why don't you let all this behind? Why don't you leave this identity that you once again created for yourself, the circles you have, the girlfriends you have, the dope dealing type of things, and just let go of it and see what else is out there." And that was, I think, 2012 or 13. And I just left and went to India and left everything I knew behind and started a new life and clean living. And, that was 6 or 7 years ago. And it's been a heck of a journey up and down, left and right, tears, blood, injuries, off and on with a little bit of drugs as well. Mm-hmm. But I finally came to a place now, like, where I am creating my life. I am living how I want to live. I'm sharing, I'm doing podcasts like this. I'm working really hard on my business. I'm helping out others in every way I possibly can. I'm able to take my family and my parents on trips now and reconnect with them. And we still argue here and there a little bit and talk about the past, but it's in a very loving and grown up sense that I honestly never thought was possible. I told myself that, my parents are just going to pass away, and maybe I will first, or whoever does, but this will never get dealt with. And, it's not, I wouldn't say it's like resolved check mark type of thing yet. I think healing and that type of growth is more of like a dance and like a learning process versus just a linear, type of race. So it's still, a constant daily type of thing. But 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even, I would have never said that I could be where I am internally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, anything. And even more important, like not even more important, but equally as important, business wise, I just thought that who I was that dope boy party kid that would always have to hustle on doing different things to try to make ends meet enough to do what you wanted to do. And I realize now that I'm living, beyond my wildest dreams, as far as all that.
Oh, totally. And there's like this pattern of hope throughout your story, because you were talking about, I love how you say that it's a dance, because I feel like that's super accurate when it comes to our mental health, when it comes to recovery from trauma, when it comes to even relationships. It's not linear. It's not like, okay, I check marked this, I ticked the box, and then I'm moving forward. It's, it's definitely wiggles and squiggles on the paper and not like going down the checklist. And so just to kind of make the timeline make sense, because you mentioned a couple things there. So after you got out of the center in Mexico, you were back for a while, but then you were sent to another boarding school, kidnapped. And there your main abuser, Jason Finlayson, I'd say his name because I've heard you say his name, and so I feel like that's important. And I Googled him, and I feel like it's important as a side note for other parents who have troubled teens and are looking for solutions. They need these resources to be able, that are searchable by name, because a lot of these folks and a lot of these facilities, they change their names, and that really makes it hard to figure out what some genuine options are for truly troubled teens that need that. But when you got to that other facility, so went from Mexico, Pascagoula, back up to the New York, Canada border, he's there. And so that must have been just a gut punch to be like, your abuser in Mexico is now on the other side of the country staring you down again. What did you think about that helped you hold on for hope for better days during that time?
Hey everyone, just a quick interruption to show gratitude to our sponsors and give you some special deals. So I don't have kids, but I also want to tell you about It's Your Magazine. They're a national family-centered publishing company with free parent magazines. They have parenting advice, events, and inspiration. I'm actually in a networking group with the publisher, and this guy is all about family. You can view a free magazine in cities in Texas, Oregon, Washington, and Florida by checking them out at itsyourmagazine.com. And in So I've always felt iffy about pesticides. Then the mosquitoes got so bad, I would get covered in them from walking from my house to the car. I called INSEC, and to say I've been impressed is an understatement. When the treatment wasn't quite doing it, the owner actually came to my house. He found the breeding sites, identified the species of mosquito, and adjusted my treatment to that species. That's when I found out he's also a beekeeper, and pollinator issues are always top of mind. So if you're in the Florida Panhandle or Gulf Coast of Alabama, give him a call, ensec.net. Now back to the show.
Yeah, so after I got out of Mexico, I went to like 3 or 4 different small facilities. Like my pattern in my life became 6 months home, 6 months away. So I went to like military schools, Catholic boarding schools, and a public school and a private school in between there. Finally, once again, I was in trouble with the law for having alcohol in my car and got sent to the one you're speaking of now. And that was that was one of the craziest experiences I've ever had. I remember coming home late at night and seeing my dad on the couch and knowing something was wrong. I remember putting a desk in front of my door, putting a knife under my bed, putting my dog in my room and being scared. And I remember waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning with my ankles cuffed and my hands cuffed, wondering how they got past all the security that I put in there and cuffed me. And I remember seeing my parents' eyes through my door peeking, like looking at me. And I was like, I remember being calm because I knew it was going to happen already. I remember not freaking out, not running to run or anything. I was like, dang, here we go again. And the escorts actually told me on the way to New York on the ride up that hey, because I was talking about Jason Finlinson, they're like, oh wow, he's running this facility here now. And I was so nervous from the entire inside. I don't think I showed it on the outside. I think at this point I'd been institutionalized enough to understand like how to show my safe self and how to act and how to look calm on the outside. But I was going crazy on the inside. I remember when I finally got there at first, he had the nerve to come out and like has the same like, hey boy, like the same little voice he has, like, dude, like I remember his voice, like, and I remember for the first like maybe minute or two at the very least, I just wanted to grab a pen, anything I could to just hurt this guy as bad as I could. And from 12 to 17, I was a big kid. I was pretty much as big as I am now at 17. So they knew and I knew like, this is not what it was when I was a kid anymore. I will hurt you. And I really wanted to. And I don't know. I think part of my like institutional type of thing kicked in, and I was like, okay, Rocky, like, what do you got to do to get out of here? What do you have to do now? You've worked this program. You've worked 5 other programs in between. Let's get out of here. And after I kind of like he talked to me a little bit right in front of the whole group. He wouldn't let me be alone with him. I didn't really see him that much after that because he was an admin at a higher level there. I was like dealing with lower level, admin people at that time. But it was, I really wanted just to hurt him. I don't know how to say it better than that. I had a couple other run-ins with him throughout my time there. One time there's this kid leaving, and we wrote in his journal and like told him, do good. We encouraging you, like stay out of here, listen to your parents and do good when you get home. Mm-hmm. And he came into our classroom, found that journal and took away all of our points and put us like level 1, 0 points. Because, that's what they don't get paid to get you out of there fast. They get paid to keep you in that program. And that was a time when he actually tried to touch me again and I flipped out. I don't know if I pushed him or what I did, but he basically, I let him know that you're not going to just grab me and kick me right now. And they didn't. I didn't get any physical abuse there. They tried to grab me and this and that, and I pushed them off me. I was able to get them off me. They had 2, 3 guys come in. Once I saw 3 of them come in, I put my hands up and I was like, don't worry, I'll get on the ground myself. Just don't touch me.
It's okay.
And that's what it was there. And, I was able to finagle my way through that program the second time. And I knew what to say. I knew what to do. And it still took me 7, 8 months to get out finally. And the time when I got out of there, I was finished with high school. I got a fake diploma because this school was incredible. And they were giving out fake diplomas. It's called Academy at Ivy Ridge in New York. But my parents saw that I graduated, got my diploma. I was about maybe 6 months away from 18, and they decided to go ahead and pull me out of the program. Mm. I remember Jason Finlinson being at the seminar that day, trying to convince them and me to not pull me out again, and you're going to ruin their life again, and don't do it. And I just told my parents, I was like, I told you guys everything about this person. I told you everything that happened. I think I should leave. I think you should get me out of here. Make the decision. And they didn't make it that night. I had to sleep the whole next day. The next day, when the seminar was supposed to be over, I finally realized, they told me like, oh, Rocky, you're getting pulled out today. They do it like that because they don't want you to talk to other kids. They want other kids to know. They're not allowed to trade information with people. So writing in that journal was like a run plan consequence because we could have wrote plans for escape, in there. It was a very, very weird vibe and very manipulative type of feeling. And as an adult, I say an adult, but at 17, I felt pretty old. Looking at all this stuff, it broke my heart to see the kids that were there at 12 when I was there at 12, and that I couldn't do anything to get them out. And that I couldn't, because there was one kid that was there simply facing a child custody battle with his parents.
Oh my gosh.
And like they left him there, and I was just like, man, like this is horrible. Like, I hope you get out soon. And I went back to that school also as an adult and saw it, just how it looked. I wasn't as brave then because I had my now ex-wife with me. I didn't want to get her in trouble. And I kind of walked around the board of the school and kind of peeked in, but I didn't, kind of break into school like I did this last weekend in Mexico. But it's just because it's in the U.S. doesn't mean it's not as manipulative, not as abusive, or not as crazy. It was very crazy. I think I was just at an older age and a larger, body to be able to deal with it better at that age. But there's kids that are, as we speak right now in these facilities across the world, anywhere from 11 to 17 years of age.
Yeah. And a lot of those, you said, you adapted, you adapted your behavior, you controlled your reactions. And then as you alluded to earlier, you later spent some time in prison, not in a rehab camp, but prison on a drug charge. A lot of former felons and probably I would dare to say former kids that were in these rehab centers are challenged to shake off these habits and mindsets and outlooks that they had to survive, and they have trouble like transitioning into whatever normal is. And do you find that you personally are discovering any outlooks, mannerisms, or habits that you had from either the prison camps or the prison itself?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the biggest thing is trust. To have your trust like snatched away at that young of age and then have it repeatedly snatched away, that's been the hardest thing. I mean, I'm talking about from my personal relationships to my family to even my business. Trust is huge for me. It's so hard for me to just, step back and actually trust a person, a process, a system, anything. And the crazy part is like, as you said, from an adult point of view, these prisons, they want you to like shed those old habits, those old ways of thinking. But what do they replace that with? What are they teaching you to replace that with? What are they giving you an option for? And if you give someone that has, survived and has not perished because he had these systems and these mindsets in place, I had to tell them, don't use them anymore, throw them away, and then not give them a proper, viable alternative and teach that to them and talk with them about it is just like saying, hey, throw up your hands. You might die, you might not, but, just try this way. It just doesn't work. You have to really teach someone and show them and spend time talking and listening, understanding, if you really want to let them let go of those habits and those mind frames and those thoughts. For me, it was just a constant battle, until finally I started putting the right information in my ears, listening to podcasts like Wayne Dyer, Ralph Smart, Joe Dispenza, Tim Ferriss, people like this that had been through some of it and that spoke on it, to really put that in my life, where I started understanding, like, there are different ways to think. There are different habits and systems I can instill within myself that are very positive that will get me to the places I want, versus just my mentality of, survive, of don't trust, of fight or flight, which, was very prevalent, I think, in anybody that goes through these type of things. Fight or flight is huge. We have these two responses. And when we get triggered or scared or worried, we pick one or the other and 100% go with it. And then to slow down and to really understand that there's other options, there's other ways, there's other, mindsets we can instill. It takes a lot of like knowing yourself, calming down, breathing, putting positive information into you, and then having that positive information validated and reaffirmed as you try it and practice it and kind of basically work it out. And that's the process that eventually leads towards, actually changing your state of mind and your frame of mind and doing something different and better with your life.
And it is a practice and it's an experiment. And it's like, and I just did an episode about this, about what worked yesterday might not work today. And it's just like that continual, okay, we're going to get up, we're going to try something new. So it almost seems like, if anything, your experience of getting physically knocked down, emotionally, mentally, everything, and then you're a get back upper, like you get back up, and now that's, that's become a part of your personal process, which is so incredible. And now you have several successful businesses. How do you stay motivated now with the mental load of trying to work through this trauma and trying to grow a business at the same time? What keeps you going every day?
It's a good question, and it's a tough one. I mean, to as an adult, to not have talked about this as a kid and not really have processed it properly and went through it, to want to do it now. People would say, like my family, like, you're crazy. Like, what are you doing? You're doing good now. Just leave it alone. And I like to think of myself as preparing for the future. I know that this stuff is in me. I noticed that even as I've been doing well in my life and in my business, that certain relationships and certain things will come up, and I'll trigger back to those times in the past. And I don't want to have that anymore. I want to work through it and understand it and learn why I think like that automatically, and grow from it. And in my opinion, this is the only way to do it, is to face it head on, to understand it, to talk about it, to really dive into it, and then share that with others as well, because that's where the real meaning comes out of it for me. I really believe that everything happens for a reason. And I believe, and I know now, that the reason I went through those things is to help share that with other people, to share that story, to share that experience and that hope. Even as a kid from a good family and a well-off father that was a physician, these things can happen. This trauma, this mental instability, mental abuse, even mental issues, don't distinguish between socioeconomic classes, races, genders, or anything. Anybody can be hurt and hit by it, and the more we talk about it, the more it's public, the better we can do in learning about it and shedding light on it.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I love that your motivation for prepping for the future, or your motivation for keeping going, is prepping for the future. I think that's so perfect. So as we wrap up today, I feel like our time has just flown by, but what advice would you give to those who are trying to overcome trauma and sift truth from fiction when it comes to their experiences and their identity?
Definitely. I would say, firstly, quiet your mind and rid yourself of any distractions around you, from music to television to people, even to, if you're putting garbage in your body, just give yourself a couple weeks a break from all that. Feed yourself good, feed yourself positivity in your ears and your eyes, your nose, your mouth, and everything. And then start finding someone to talk about it with. If you can't find a person, write it down. That's what I started doing. That's how I'm actually writing my book now, is because I started writing it as a journal. And then I realized, if I want to share this, I can actually share this in a book form also. But it's really important to get it off. If you get it off your chest, I think many times for women, it's a little bit easier. And for men, society tells us, we're not allowed to talk about this stuff. It's, don't say anything, hush, hush. And that's horrible. We should definitely, women and men, all people alike, should be able to talk about these things that were heavy on our hearts, that causes trauma. That's like the first, second, and the third, I think, face your fears. Everything that you talk about, everything you're scared of, once you start doing it, once you, kind of get another end of it, it's really not as scary as you thought it was. It's just scary leading up to it. Most of these things that we're afraid of, once we do them, we realize how small they really are, and we, move on to the next step. So yeah, that's my biggest things. I feel like, is disconnecting, ridding yourself of the distractions, finding a good person or a good book to write in and talk about these issues, facing your fears with it. And then, eventually, if you want to follow like my footsteps, is sharing it, because the more we all that have been through this stuff, the more we all share about it, the more people grow, the more people learn, the less it happens, in the future, the more the younger generation can learn from our experiences versus having to, go down that deep hole themselves and possibly, have a lot of consequences personally from it, as well as for our communities as a whole and the world as a whole from it.
That is so good. Rocky, when you do come out with that book, it's going to be so good. It's going to be so, so good. I am so grateful that we met, and I can't wait to introduce, I can't wait for everyone to just, in a way, meet you. So if they want to follow you on social media and keep up with your many, many, many endeavors, how can they do that?
So my personal blog is rockykandola.com. It's just ROCKYKANDOLA. rehab.com. And all my businesses, from my rental agency, my tea company, and my hair company, there's links to it all on that website as well. The rental company is Rocky's Rentals, the tea company is Manali Tea Co., and the hair company is Hair Made in India. So you can Google it. We're on all social media. We're very active. So yeah, come follow us. The blog's on there where I put all the stories of the past as well on there too.
Awesome. Thank you again, my friend. That's a wrap. That was great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are you still listening? Just kidding, of course you are. Since you're here, here's some ways you can support the show. Stalk me on social media, leave a review, share an episode with a friend, or check out my Teespring page for delightfully sarcastic apparel. Links are in the episode description.